Seiichi was a constipated loser high schooler who smelled like an anime convention all day long, causing him to be bullied. Even after being Isekai'd, he was still a pathetic loser until he stole a fruit that gave him a cheat leveling ability, making him so overpowered that his riz attracted all kinds of creatures. One day while at school, Seiichi was being bullied by his classmates once again when they heard a voice claiming to be God. God told them to form groups and make sure they stayed together, because he was going to transport them to an Isekai world as heroes. He gives each student a different skill and an ability to read others' statuses. When Seiichi's status was checked by a fellow classmate, he had the lowest stats and his race was even stated as barely human. This made them mock him and revealed they would never allow a useless piece of garbage in their group. Everyone except for Seiichi was transported as his classmates didn't want to be paired with the fatso, so he was left behind. However, God noticed he was still there, and when he realized that he was the unwanted loser, he gave Seiichi an extra special skill and transported him as well. Alone and hungry after spending 5 days in a forest, Seiichi was still pulling a massive gaslighting and deluding himself into thinking he was the main character who will somehow level up without doing shit. He was so hungry that he tried to eat a worm he saw crawling on the ground, but before he could pick it up, something jumped out of the bushes and stepped on him. As he lay on the ground, he saw a fruit and immediately picked it up. He appraised it and discovered it was called Fruit of Evolution, but it had no additional information on it. Seiichi quickly ate the horribly tasting fruit thinking he'll be transformed into a Riz Lord. However, he then heard a voice prompting him to activate the fruit. Startled, he wondered what the voice was and what it meant. But when nothing happened, he got up and went in search of more food. He came across a group of monkeys, and when he checked their stats, he discovered they were level 120 monkeys with higher IQ than him.
Emotional damage!
And this made him feel insulted that monkeys were above him. As he watched them and wondered what they were up to, the monkeys soon left, and he immediately went to pick up the fruits they left behind. He put them in his item box and noticed the bottles that were there. Using his appraisal skill, he discovered they were high-grade recovery potions, so he wasted no time in stealing them too. In a town somewhere, the other students that had been transported stood talking. A group approached Kanazuki, Seiichi's senior from school, and asked where Seiichi was, but she told them that he had been transported to a different location, and they wondered if he was doing okay. Meanwhile, Seiichi was about to eat a mushroom he had found, but it had no information on it. However, the idiot still ate it and immediately fell to the ground in pain. And even though he was about to die, Seiichi decided to die eating. He ate the remaining Fruit of Evolution he had and immediately he felt better. He had also acquired poison resistance and his rank increased. But before he could celebrate his rank increment, he was attacked by a clever monkey. It managed to injure him and he immediately drank one of the recovery potions he stole. Seiichi stood up and tried to challenge the monkey, but since he was only as strong as an NPC, he was once again beaten up. Before the monkey could eat him, it took a whiff of his natural garbage-smelling cologne and died. The monkey's remains turned into items and he acquired new skills from them. Among the items was a book about clever monkeys, and Seiichi was surprised he could read the book as it was written in a language he had never seen before. It was then he realized that the special skill he had been given was the reason he could read the book. Just then, the voice informed him that evolution had commenced. He had no idea what was going on, but he was in extreme pain. When the pain subsided, he got up and realized he was not only thinner, but his stats had increased incredibly. However, he soon learned that he hadn't completed his evolution and would still go through the pain at least 9 more times. He was however pissed because he was still at level 1, even though he had defeated a level 120 cleaver monkey. Seiichi had spent 5 months in the forest and had since been able to utilize the knowledge he had gotten from the clever monkey to survive. He defeated a level 311 acrowolf and acquired new skills as well as a legendary water spirit's dagger. He picked up the book containing the acrowolf knowledge and saw a spot that was hidden on the map, which made him remember that it was the same way on the clever monkey book and decided to check it out later. He immediately went through another evolution, and when it was over, he wondered what would happen when he went through the final evolution. As he lay wondering about the final evolution, he realized that he was surrounded by clever monkeys. Before he could react, a big red ugly ass gorilla with a pink flower on its head fell from the sky and demanded Seiichi fight it. Even though he had gotten stronger, he was still a very big coward and fearfully asked if he could decline. But the gorilla refused. It assured him that the monkeys won't interfere with the fight, and Seiichi feared for his life because it was at level 700. When the gorilla threw a punch, Seiichi dodged it and was shocked by how strong it was while also noticing the gorilla giving him some serious lovey-dovey eyes. It was saying how much it loved strong men. And that was when Seiichi realized it was actually a she, and he was disgusted by the fact that his Riz could only attract gorillas. He used a slash attack, which the gorilla easily dodged, and it threw a punch at him, which he wasn't able to dodge, and was sent flying across the forest. The gorilla was so impressed by the fact that her flash fist didn't kill him and said she wanted him since Seiichi was exactly her spec. However, he made it clear he wasn't interested in a gorilla, but she still introduced herself as Seiichi, while trying to act all cute and shy. He asked why an ugly gorilla had the name of a pretty girl, and all Seiichi heard was that she was pretty. Still disgusted, he used the adamant claw skill he had gotten from the Acrowolf to attack her, but she easily jumped out of the way and flew up. She used air thrust and came down on him like a nuclear missile. Seiichi dodged it and hoped that the gorilla had taken itself out by doing that, but she stood up and expressed her joy at him being able to dodge her attack. Seiichi then used the water spirit's dagger to amplify his water magic, raising his hand above his head. He used a skill called Fall Disaster that would unleash a lot of water on his opponent. However, since he was as dumb as a doorknob, he didn't direct the water at Seiichi and was instead hit by his own attack. Dripping wet, he tried to cover up his own stupidity by acting cool and telling Seiichi she was good. However, she immediately told him that she had nothing to do with what had happened, and he was embarrassed that a gorilla had called him out on his foolishness. She didn't give him time to recover as she used Flash Fist to beat the shit out of him. Seiichi's miserable life flashed before his eyes, and as a last resort, he unleashed his body odor, which had now become a skill called Stench Performer. Instead of killing her like it had done to the clever monkey, Seiichi declared her love for him and asked him to marry her. At Seiichi's house, Seiichi demanded she let him go, but Seiichi told him that he was her husband, and he had to stay with her. Seiichi pointed out that she was a Dan gorilla, and he was a human, so there was no way they could be married. Instead of responding, she told him to eat it. When he took a bite, he was surprised by how delicious it was. Seiichi revealed she had made new clothes for him, and Seiichi was a few seconds away from losing his mind, because he couldn't understand why a gorilla was giving wife material. She then asked if that made her a good bride, and he said yes, if she married a gorilla, but she insisted that they got married. He asked her how she was able to talk, and she told him she had found some books in a cave and read them. She showed him the books, and while reading them, he instantly acquired the skills. While he watched Seiichi catch fish, Seiichi plotted his escape, but before he could make it far, he came face to face with a giant spider and screamed out like a little bitch. Seiichi immediately came to his rescue and punched it, sending it flying across the sky. She asked a shaken Seiichi if he was okay, and he told her yes, but he was surprised by how worried she was about him, which made him realize he'd been a shallow prick for judging her based on appearance. While they ate, Seiichi told Seiichi that she and the clever monkeys would go out to gather the fruit of evolution. She asked if he knew what it was, and he immediately said no, even though he had stolen the ones she had previously gathered from the clever monkeys. She told him that eating 10 of the fruit would let one become overpowered. However, eating 11 would kill you. She also mentioned that she herself had already eaten 10, but someone had stolen the one she had gathered to give to her future husband. Seiichi got scared when she said she'd kill the thief that stole them, so he immediately begged for his life, admitting that he was the one that stole them. She forgave but said since he'd eaten them, they were getting married. The look on his face made Seiichi ask if he hated her, and he said no, which immediately made her pull up dressed as a bride and begged him to get married. Seiichi soon left to go hunting, and Seiichi used it as an opportunity to escape. Meanwhile, at another place, Seiichi's classmates are training. Kanazuki and her friends recalled that they had been tasked with defeating the demon lord by the king on the day they had arrived. Back in the forest, Seiichi was running away from Seiichi, who discovered he was missing. He came across a cave with an intimidating aura, but ran inside when he heard Seiichi's voice close by. Inside the cave, he opened a door and entered a room where he saw a skeleton with glowing red eyes seated on a throne. The skeleton was impressed that he had been able to reach his room and believed he had to be strong to have managed that. Seiichi, on the other hand, saw him as dangerous and decided to check his stats, which revealed that he was the Dark Lord Xenos and was at level 1. He was relieved because he could easily take him on, but Xenos told him to look again, which he did. It turned out that he had tricked him and was actually at level 1500. He told Seiichi that he had thought the first person to enter into his room would be a strong person, but instead a cannon fodder loser with NPC energy had walked in. He then tried to stab Seiichi, but Seiichi got in the way and was stabbed instead. Seiichi called out her name, which made her happy that he had called her name for the first time since they met. He tried to give her recovery potions, but she said it was no use since she was already dead. She explained that she was still able to speak to him because of her skill called Kaiser Majesty, which kept her going for a while. Seiichi bawled his eyes out apologizing for how he had treated her, but she told him not to worry and asked him to smile as her last request. Meanwhile, Xenos, who stood back watching their emotional farewell, found the whole thing ridiculous. Seiichi told him to shut his web-infested mouth because he didn't understand them. Making it the first time in his pathetic life, he bravely stood up to someone. He attacked Xenos, who easily blocked his attacks, and while they fought, Seiichi told him how wonderful Seiya had been. Xenos was surprised by his outburst and asked if he actually had feelings for a freaking gorilla, and Seiichi declared that he loved Seiya. Seiichi then used Ocean Impact and, actually using his brain this time around, directed its flow at Xenos, who used a skill called Magic Hole to trap the water. He told Seiichi to give up, saying a weakling like him could never defeat him. However, he refused, claiming that he hadn't accepted Seiya's feelings for him. So, fueled by the great power of love and using his skill of instant movement, he attacked a surprised Xenos and stabbed him. Xenos accepted his defeat and thanked Seiichi for showing him true love. But before he disappeared, Seiichi saw a young woman appear and hug him. As they hugged, he told her he was going to protect her this time around. Seiichi watched them disappear, but soon remembered Seiya and ran to her. She too had started to disappear, but he kissed her right before she disappeared. A bright light shone, and lying where Seiya had been before was a beautiful girl with red hair and a pink flower in her hair. Seiichi was so surprised when she got up and ran to hug him that he had a serious nosebleed. He was so shocked when he realized that she was Seiya. Seiichi read Xenos' story and learned that he had been a Nobel 1500 years ago, but was betrayed by his wife and the Emperor. The only person who stood by him was his maid Maria, who loved him, but she died after she sacrificed herself to save him. After her death, he became a vengeful monster and spent his days alone in the cave. Moved by their story, Seiichi told Seiya that he was glad he was able to reunite the two again. Soon after, Seiichi's final evolution began, and when it was over, he became even more handsome, but still ugly compared to Gojo Satoru. He told Seiya that he wanted to leave the forest, and she said she'd go anywhere with him. Just then, a little sheep appeared and introduced himself as Miss Sheep, the dungeon administrator. He claimed he had come because they were the first to clear the dungeon, and Seiichi pointed out that he was a bit late, so he admitted that he got held up because he was enjoying Seiichi's suffering as he went through his final evolution. He then went ahead to give Seiichi the rewards for clearing the dungeon, which were a Fruit of Evolution cultivation set and a 10-day travel set. He also gave Seiya a dress and Seiichi a helmet before he transported them out of the forest, which allowed them to begin their journey. Seiichi and Seiya decide to head to the nearest town and register at the Adventurers Guild to get their IDs, but on the way they encounter a level 88 slime. However, Seiichi easily defeated it and realized he had become overpowered. Among the items that dropped was a pair of boots, which he gave them some skill cards that allowed him to level up. Seiichi wasn't happy about leveling up because he felt he was becoming a monster, and he didn't like it. When he took off his helmet, it turned into a robe, and Seiya handed him the note that fell out of it. It was a letter from Miss Sheep, and in it he explained that the helmet changed because Seiichi had leveled up and the robe will conceal his true strength from others. At the town gate, Seiichi lied that he and Seiya had lost their IDs. So the guard there asked them to touch the Gem of Truth to determine their criminal status before he could let them enter. Once they did, he allowed them pass through and warned them to be careful of the guild when they told him of their plan to register there. He then introduced himself as Claude and asked them to come to him if they needed any help. At the guild, Seiichi thought Claude was probably exaggerating when he opened the door and saw a blonde woman pulling a 50 Shades of Grey right in front of everyone. He immediately shut the door as he didn't believe what he'd just seen. He opened it again, and this time she was pouring candle wax on a man. Looking around, he saw more weird-ass people, and he quickly realized it was a hentai fest and told Seiya they should leave. However, before they could leave, they were stopped by the guild master, who was dressed in only Speedos. He introduced himself as Gussel Clute, and Seiichi thought he was an airhead who only had interest in his muscles. He flexed his muscles in their face and strategically pushed them into the building. Inside, he called the attention of the blonde woman, who immediately changed her outfit and introduced herself as Eris McLean, the receptionist. She told him that their guild collected information from around the world, and if he signed up with them, he'd have access to them. Seiichi recalled his friends, and Seiya told him it would be a good idea to join the guild. As they finished their registration, 3 Viking wanteds with mohawks came in and asked Seiichi to come with them. They took him to the back of the building, and when they took off his robe, they were shocked because he was so handsome. Seiichi was caught off guard when he saw their leader had stripped, and was even more shocked when they told him that it was their welcome party for him. Man didn't want anything to do with sus people, so he made a run for it to protect his virgin ass. but they went after him. They tried to convince him that he loved the experience, but he didn't listen and ran faster. Impressed by his speed, they said he was the man they were looking for, but they couldn't keep up with him, so they eventually stopped chasing him. Seiichi managed to get back to the guild, and Gusel said he was surprised he had made it back. Eris told him that he was the first person to make it back alive. Eris told the couple that they needed to pass some tests before joining the guild officially. Gusel explained that they needed someone who was at least a B-rank adventurer to supervise them for the tests and introduce them to Artoria, an A-rank baddie adventurer. Seiichi was only focused on her massive plots and didn't hear a word she said, so Seiria had to call him to order. Artoria wasn't pleased with the idea, and when she complained, Gusel told her that since he survived the Mohawks, he could survive her. She finally accepted and apologized for her rude behavior. While heading to their first test, Artoria told them that they would start with odd jobs. The first was helping out at an orphanage, and Seiria volunteered to do it. While on their way to the second job, Artoria helped a kid who had gotten injured while playing. As she tended to his injured leg, the rope holding some wooden planks together came loose, but before Seiichi could get to them, it fell on top of them. When he got closer, he saw that Artoria had managed to stop it using a defense skill and wondered if she had known it would fall. The second quest was to demolish a building, and while Artoria was trying to explain how they would do the job, Seiichi walked into the building and, forgetting he was extremely overpowered, pushed a single brick, making the entire house fall on him. Artoria screamed in surprise, thinking he was hurt, and ran to look for him. While she looked for him, she blamed herself for what happened because everyone around her always got hurt, and that was why she was called Artoria the Calamity. As she cried, Seiichi came out from under the rubble, and as soon as she saw him, she called him a brainless idiot while scolding him for acting carelessly. She told him that as an adventurer, he needed to be able to sense danger and be careful, saying that his stupidity would cost his team their lives. Seiichi then apologized, and they went on to the next quest. As Seiichi's classmates trained, their instructor Zakia watched them from a balcony with another knight. He told the knight that he was against sending them to fight against the Demon Lord, because the war had nothing to do with them. He also admitted he was against the war with the demons completely, and said he would do everything he could to protect them. Back at the village, Artoria informed Seiichi that the final task was to walk a dog. Seiichi thought it would be a piece of cake until he saw that the dog was actually a wolf. The wolf chased him around the garden while its owner and Artoria stood watching. The owner pointed out that Artoria seemed happier and hinted that it was because of Seiichi, but she immediately denied it, even though her face was as red as a tomato. With the quest completed, they returned to the guild, and Gusel pulled out their reward from his speedos, like it was the most natural thing to do. Eris asked if they had a place to stay, and when they said no, Artoria told them that they could stay at the inn she was staying at. Eris and Gusel were surprised because it wasn't like her to do something like that. Artoria got embarrassed, and before she could withdraw the offer, Seiichi and Seiria agreed. Soon Seiichi, Seiria, and Artoria went to a field to do another test. Artoria explained that all they had to do was gather up 10 medicinal herbs and they would be done. Seiichi immediately ran off without listening to everything she had to say, and Artoria just smiled as she watched Seiria go after him. Seiria handed over the herbs she had picked to Artoria, who praised her, but when it was Seiichi's turn, he handed over mana mushrooms. Artoria asked where the herbs were, and he said he hadn't seen any, causing her to express how shocked she was that someone could be so dumb and airheaded that he didn't notice the herbs growing next to his feet. He picked them and gave them to her, but she said they weren't enough, and once again he ran off into the forest in search of what was right in front of him. As he wondered why he could only find rare herbs, he heard some people talking, but since he didn't know how to mind his own business, he went to see who they were. He couldn't hear what they were talking about, so he decided to go ask them if they knew where he could find the herbs he was looking for. It turned out they were demons under the command of Leah, the captain of the 3rd Division of the Demon Lord's army. Seiichi just thought of them as weirdos and tried to leave, but they stopped him because they didn't want him spoiling their plan since he'd seen them, and they assumed he also heard their plan. They summoned an ugly-ass troll which used its giant club to hit Seiichi, but he stopped it using his absorb skill that transferred his opponent's strength to him. Scared shitless, the cowardly demons ran off, so Seiichi had no other choice but to return to Artoria and Seiria with the rare herbs he found. In the end, Artoria ended up giving him the herbs she had since he looked so helpless. Back in the demon realm, Leia questioned the demon squad that had run from Seiichi. They admitted that they had gone to the human realm to set up teleportation traps so they could reduce the human army before they had a chance to fight. She asked where the traps would send them to, and they told her that it would take them to the dungeon of the Black Dragon God. Leah said she felt bad for the humans who had fallen in the trap, but told them they needed to be punished for their disobedience. They ran away when she mentioned they would be lashed 500 times each. Meanwhile, in the human realm, while waiting for Artoria so they could begin their final test, Seiichi and Seiichi met Claude, the night they had met at the town's gate when they first arrived. He asked them to keep being nice to Artoria, even after their tests were done, and just then, Artoria joined them asking if they knew each other. Claude just told her she had met good people. He then asked if it was their final test and wished them luck before they left. The final test was to defeat 10 slimes, so Artoria asked Seiichi what weapons she would use, but she said her fists were enough. Artoria wasn't convinced, but said she'd watch and see what happened. The test began, and just as Seiichi was about to slash a slime, it disappeared. Artoria checked out the area and realized that there were teleportation spells set up all over the area. She told them that the test was on hold, and while she instructed them to return to the town, she accidentally stepped in one of the traps. Seiichi and Seiichi quickly grabbed onto her, and all three of them were teleported to the dungeon. The dragon felt their presence immediately. They were transported into the dungeon and was immediately enraged. Since they had no idea where they were or how to get back, Artoria suggested they find a way out. She then asked why they had followed her while scolding them for neglecting the use of their brains. Seiichi told her that his body had reacted before he could think, and Seiichi said she had just wanted to help her. Moved by their determination, Artoria forgave them and handed a guide stone to Seiichi. She said it would lead whoever had it to any missing member of their party, and if the person was in danger, it would glow red. As soon as she told them to stick together and not get separated, Artoria accidentally stepped on a trap and set it off. A stone wall rose and separated her from them, and when she tried calling out to them, it was pointless as they couldn't hear her, so she tried to find another way to rejoin them. On the other side of the wall, Seiichi was freaking out because they got separated and tried to use his fists to break down the wall thinking he was the Saitama. Seiichi showed him the Gid stone. She said they could use it to track Artoria, but unfortunately none of them knew how to use it. Seiichi asked it to show the way, and surprisingly it moved and flew towards the stone wall that had separated them in the first place. Seiichi then suggested they take the path behind them and find another path to her. Artoria was fighting off a mummy who threw her against the wall with so much force causing her to cough out blood, but she managed to get back up and slashed it in two. With the mummy defeated, she looked like she'd been through a lot and sat exhausted on the floor while she hoped Seiichi and Seiichi were okay. Meanwhile, Seiichi and Seiichi kept walking into dead ends, and just before he could lose his shit and pop off, Seiichi called him into a room where she had found a large treasure chest. Seiichi did the smartest thing he'd ever done since entering the dungeon and walked away, and when Seiichi asked why, he said it looks suspicious. While they talked, the chest demanded they open it, and when they did nothing, it grew limbs and tried to attack them, which made Seiichi use his aqua binding skill and shot it down. The chest disappeared and Seiichi leveled up again. Just then, an item box appeared in front of them, and inside they found the book on the treasure chest. From the book they learned that the invention of the item box had reduced the importance of the treasure chest. The desire to interact with humans again led the treasure chest to grow limbs and be able to speak and use magic. This only made the humans see it as a monster, and they chased it away. So hopeless and alone, the treasure chest could only roam about to places it had fond memories. They also found a rare item known as the Ring of Misfortune, and after appraising it, Seiichi learned that it multiplied a person's luck by -2. Seiichi then called his attention, but when he looked at her, she had her hand down her dress and was digging around her plots when she pulled out the Gid stone that was glowing red. Meanwhile, an exhausted Artoria used her axe as a walking stick as she unknowingly walked towards the room that held the dragon. She pushed the door open and walked in, and just as the door shut behind her, she called a presence before she saw a large dragon who asked her if she had come to be eaten. The dragon then curled into itself and used some kind of wind magic to push her back. Not wanting to back down in the face of danger, and when she could finally move again, she attacked the dragon. In the demon realm, Leia had just finished dishing out her punishment to her soldiers and told them to stop being whiny babies because she hadn't done anything serious to them. She claimed that the Black Dragon God was way worse, and he was known as the strongest one in the Demon Lord's army, and that running into him meant you had the worst luck. Seiichi and Seiichi watched the glowing stone, and Seiichi remembered Artoria's warning about the stone changing colors. They started freaking out because they knew Artoria was in danger, and the stone flew out of Seiichi's hand and hit the wall. Out of desperation, Seiichi punched the wall, and this time around he was able to break it even if it hurt his hands. In the Black Dragon's room, Artoria was having her ass handed to her, but she wasn't ready to give up. because she wanted to make sure that Seiichi and Seiya made it out safely. She decided to use her full strength, and so she charged a Super Saiyan attack and released her Calamity Berserker. The Black Dragon didn't even seem fazed at her little show of power, and when she attacked, he simply used his claw to swipe at her like a pesky fly. Although he hit her, she came back again with full force, but before she could get close to him, he fired spikes from his tail which pinned her to the wall while telling her to know her place. Artoria, who was completely consumed by her calamity, didn't stay down and tried to attack him again. This time around he impaled her with the spikes on his tail and admitted she had surprised him. He threw her to the floor, and as she lay there she muttered an apology to Seiichi and Seiya because she believed she'd failed them by not defeating the dragon. She accepted her fate and closed her eyes, and just as the dragon was about to finish her off she heard her name. As she opened them, she saw Seiichi using his robe as a shield against the dragon's fire while holding a smiling Seiya, who said they had come to rescue her. Artoria asked Seiichi and Seiya how they had found her, and Seiya explained that when the Gidstone started glowing red, they knew she was in danger, and Seiichi, who believed he was Superman, managed to break down the walls in their path, clearing the way for them to get to her easily. She then asked about the dragon, and Seiichi pointed at its slumped figure, saying they had accidentally hit him on their way in. The Black Dragon woke up more pissed than he was earlier because he was being bothered by filthy humans. He told them they would die by his hands, but Seiichi said he had no plans on losing to an ugly giant lizard. He attacked Seiichi with his fire breath, but he easily dodged it using instant movement. Annoyed that he was being outsmarted by livestock, the Black Dragon used conquering claws to throw a fireball at Seiichi, which he managed to block using his swords but was pushed back. Seiichi used advanced appraisal and discovered that the dragon was by far stronger than him since he was at level 5000. He managed to avoid getting hit by its tail using instant movement, but the dragon held him in place with a spell and used its tail to slap Seiichi into a wall. Seiichi wondered why his absorb and bind resistance skills weren't working when the Black Dragon unleashed his ultimate skill called Hell Inferno. Seiichi was sure they'd be burnt to a crisp this time around until Seiya called out to him and told him to use the skill he used when he fought her, with renewed hope. He used his Water Spirit's dagger to activate the Fall Disaster, completely drenching both he and the dragon in water. At this point, the dragon was completely pissed and said he wasn't going to lose to another worthless human, so he shot a fireball at Seiichi, who dodged again, but he was once again held in place by a spell. As the dragon prepared to deliver his final blow, Seiichi willed his body to move and acquired an intimidation resistance skill. He then moved to attack the dragon, who was surprised that he had been able to release himself, but before he could react, Seiichi sliced him up nicely. He couldn't believe he had lost to another human and lamented about his failed dream before disappearing, leaving behind an item box. As Seiichi wondered why the Black Dragon had hated humans so much, he leveled up, and an excited Seiya tackled him to the ground. He asked her how Artoria was doing, and she said that the recovery potions put her to sleep, and she would be fine by the time she woke up. Relieved that she was fine, Seiichi wanted to go home, but Seiya asked if he knew the way out of the dungeon, and he said they could check the items box for something that would help them. He acquired more skills as he touched the items and realized that if he ate the Black Dragon God's gem that he picked up, it would increase his stats and magic potency. In the items box, he also found a Black Conqueror's long coat that was better than his former robe that got burnt by the Black Dragon. The last item in the box was the Black Dragon's biography. From it, they learned that he was once a guardian deity for humans, but the humans got greedy and wanted to make powerful weapons from the Black Dragon's materials, and so they made plans to take him down. The one who had saved him was the Demon Lord, but he was defeated by the heroes the humans summoned. So with the Demon Lord dead, they sealed the Black Dragon in his dungeon, and he promised to get revenge on mankind. After reading his story, Seiichi cried. Seiya later pointed out that Mr. Sheep hadn't come even though he had cleared the dungeon. Just as Seiichi was going to respond, a smoke bomb exploded in his face, leaving him with an afro. A letter fell to the ground and Seiya picked it up, saying it was from Sheep. In the letter, he congratulated Seiichi on clearing the dungeon, while slowly becoming a heartless monster. He also explained that even though he cleared the dungeon, he had failed to keep the Black Dragon alive, so he could live peacefully with the Demon Lord. Finally, he told him to keep up the good work and clear more dungeons, but also said he was going on vacation, so Seiichi should actually refrain from doing that, which made him scream in frustration. They went back to the field with the still unconscious Artoria in Seiichi's arms, and as they walked towards the town's gate, she woke up and demanded he put her down. As she struggled to get out of his arms, Seiya told her to be careful, because even though her wounds had healed, she was still weak. Artoria then apologized for getting them caught up in her misfortune. So she showed them her status and they saw that her luck was negative 2 million. She explained that she'd been known as the bearer of calamity since she was born, and that she brought misfortune to everyone around her. Seiichi asked if there was a way to break the curse, and said there wasn't. When they eventually got to the guild, Artoria asked Eris what was going on, and she said they were gathering information to find their missing friends, and she got all teary-eyed because Eris had referred to her as a friend. Seiichi then gave a very emotional speech on how she was important to them, and they didn't care about her auto-connect proximity bad luck curse. The entire thing became too much for her to handle and she ran off. But Saria told Seiichi to go after her and make sure she was okay. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, Leah informed her squad that the Black Dragon God had been defeated. They were shocked because he was the strongest one in the Demon Lord's army, and they wondered who was powerful enough to have defeated him. Seiichi was trying to find Artoria using the good stone when he ran into Adriana, the owner of the wolf he had walked before. He asked if she had seen Artoria, and she said no, but then asked if he knew about Artoria's predisposition, and he said he did, so she asked him to get closer to Artoria. He'd assured her that Artoria was important to him, so he would not abandon her. He eventually found Artoria at the place they had their first quest, and he asked what she was doing there. But instead of answering him, she asked if she was really important to them, and he said yes. He then hugged her, and said he would always be around if she needed him. But Artoria was too stunned to say anything, so she just let him hold her. Seiichi soon began thinking with his little head, and while smiling like a creep, he told himself that she smelled good. Artoria had called his name, and he jumped like he'd been caught stealing. She said she felt embarrassed by everything, but thanked him. Thinking of how he could help, he remembered the ring he had found in the dungeon, and figured it would have an opposite effect on Artoria, since her luck was already in the negative. He slipped the ring on her finger, and when she asked what it was, he told her that it would increase her luck. Artoria suddenly pushed him and ran away, leaving Seiichi confused by her behavior, which made him wonder what he had done wrong. He soon realized that he had sounded like he was proposing to her when he gave her the ring, and went after her to clear up the confusion, but soon stopped when he realized she was fine. Seiichi looked depressed while having breakfast with Saria, and when she asked what was wrong, he revealed that Artoria was avoiding him. Saria told him not to worry since she was sure Artoria did not hate him. When he asked what she wanted to spend the day doing, she said she wanted to help out at the orphanage. So Seiichi explained he'll go around town and gather information. After parting ways with Saria, Seiichi went to the guild to ask Gussel and Eris if they had information on any major events that had happened recently in hopes that he would find clues that would lead to Kanazuki and the others. Gussel told him that he'd heard that a neighboring country had done a hero summoning and brought heroes from another world to fight the resurrected demon lord. Unfortunately, they didn't know more and told him to check out the Royal Library for more information. Gussel pulled out a map from his speedos and handed it over to Seiichi, who looked like he would die from the smell. In the Kaiser Empire, the king and his crook nose, word-faced advisors spoke about the heroes they had summoned. The king complained that Zekia had not allowed them to engage in real-life battles, so Wordface suggested that they enrolled the heroes in the Barbator Magic Academy. He said that they would easily dominate the school and top the classes, which will allow them to show other nations their power. The king was worried that the plan would fail, but the advisor said since the heroes were still children, they could easily manipulate. The king asked how they planned to achieve it, and he explained they would make them wear enslavement bracelets, which would ensure they didn't disobey them. Meanwhile, Seiichi couldn't get useful information at the Royal Library, so he left and went to explore the town. He came across a young girl with dog ears selling paintings, and when he asked how much they cost, she was surprised because no one had offered to buy any from her before. With his purchase in hand, he realized he was hungry and followed the smell of food to a hidden cafe in the alley. Before going in, he prayed the place wasn't filled with perverted weirdos like the guild. Inside, he met only two people, a blonde-haired man and the bartender who welcomed him. Seiichi devoured the food that was set before him like a starving man, and the blonde-haired man laughed at his behavior, after which he introduced himself as Rands. Seiichi introduced himself in Rands, said his name sounded Eastern, and not wanting to give away the fact that he was from another world, he played along. Rands then introduced the bartender as Node, the cafe's owner. Artoria was seated with Adriana in her garden, and as they talked, Adriana told her to admit that she was in love with Seiichi, and an emotional, teary-eyed Artoria said she wanted to let Seiichi know how she felt about him. Back at the cafe, Node told Seiichi that if a man placed a ring on a woman's left ring finger, he was promising his eternal love for her, and said that if he tried to take it back or even tried to say it was a mistake, he'd be castrated. A shocked Seiichi imagined his sausage being cut in two and knew he didn't want that. Ran suggested that he marry Artoria instead. When he hesitated, Node figured he already had someone else in mind, and Rand's outright told him to be open-minded and start his own harem. Before he left, Node told him to make his intentions clear and apologize if he had to. After he left, Node told Rands to be careful not to expose himself. Seiichi went to the orphanage to pick Saria up and ran into Artoria, who came to look for him. He wanted to explain his intention for giving her the ring and apologize to her, but he was too much of a coward to open his mouth. When he finally grew some balls and tried to speak, she stopped him with a kiss. She said she knew he hadn't given her the ring because he had feelings for her, but she didn't care because she was in love with him. Seiichi was torn between staying loyal to his gorilla wife and giving in to his feelings for the awkward Artoria. And before he could respond, Saria came out and told him that she didn't mind sharing him because it was normal for females to flock to strong males. She told Seiichi to accept Artoria, and he wasted no time in proclaiming his love for her. They shared a kiss and Saria hugged them and proclaimed the birth of their hybrid harem. Duskwell thrust his hips in Seiichi's face as he ate, and Seiichi told him that he could speak without putting his junk in his face. He advised Seiichi to get a horse since every high-ranking adventurer had to have one, and pulled out a map from his speedos again. Seiichi ended up going to buy a horse alone since Saria and Artoria had other things to attend to. When he got to the place, the old geezer who owned the place asked if he wanted a horse for the Royal Cup. He'd explained that it was a race around the city walls, and because of the nature of the race, the winners got expensive rewards. As he showed Seiichi the collection of horses he had for racing, Seiichi wondered why the crazy man was showing him racehorses when he had no intention of joining the Royal Cup. The next was a dumb-looking knockoff of Santa's reindeers which died easily because they forgot to breathe. And the last one was a violent donkey that hated everyone. As Seiichi watched her beat up the owner, he wondered what she was saying and immediately acquired a skill to understand all languages. Seiichi called her a loud mouth when he finally understood what she was saying, and she noticed he could understand her, so she told him to come into her pen. As soon as he stepped in, she tried to kick him, but he dodged it easily. She tried again, and he held up her hind legs. She eventually gave up and apologized to him, but she then told him that he was the one she had been waiting to serve all her life. She introduced herself as Lulun, and Seiichi told the owner he would buy her. But before they left, she kicked the man in the face one more time. Lulun was so excited to be out of the stables for the first time in her life and found everything she saw fascinating. Seiichi bought her food and she asked if she could get more after she was done. As they walked around the market, Seiichi saw someone speaking with the dog-eared girl he'd bought a painting from and went over to see what was happening. The girl recognized him immediately and thanked him again for buying a painting. The man who had been speaking to her barely acknowledged Seiichi and told her to join the charity painting competition that was held a month after the Royal Cup race. May said she wasn't talented enough to join such a competition, but the young man said that since Seiichi had already bought her painting, it meant that he had recognized her talent. He then asked Seiichi if he had bought any of his own paintings, and he said no, which left him shocked that Seiichi had never seen his paintings before, so he showed one to him. Lulun and Seiichi took one look at the terrible painting and said it looked like a triangle, and while he was wallowing in shame, Seiichi asked May who he was. The young man introduced himself as Clay Burger, the eldest son of Duke Burger, then went back to begging May to join the competition. Before she could respond, Seiichi told her that he was joining the Royal Cup and said that if he finished at the top, she too should try and enter the painting competition. She revealed that the Royal Cup was dangerous and asked if he wasn't scared. So he admitted that he was, but said if he didn't try, he would never overcome his fear. Clay mentioned that the prize for the 5th place in the race was a gigantic fish, and as soon as the gluttonous Lulun heard this, she became very excited. On the day of the Royal Cup, before the race began, the announcer introduced the prizes that were to be won. The 2nd place prize was pictures of the Valkyrie captain, which had the crowd screaming with excitement, and the grand prize was a ticket to spend the entire day with the Valkyries. All of which Lulun had no interest with, since all she wanted was the 5th place prize that was the gigantic fish. May came to see Seiichi and asked him to withdraw because the race was dangerous, but like some wise sage, he gave her a whole speech of how everyone was scared of the first step and needed someone to push them. He then told her he was going to be the one to help her with her first step. The rules were explained and the race began. Everyone took off on their horses, except for those who had dear horses that died because they were startled by the sound of the starting gun. Lulun and Seiichi were falling behind because Lulun was hungry and had no energy to run. Seiichi checked his pocket dimension and found the fruit of evolution cultivation set that Mr. Sheep had given to him and gave it to her to eat. As the race progressed, the contestants used whatever trick they could think of to make sure they were in the lead. One contestant blew on a horn which summoned a pack of grand wolves and a large hell wolf that blocked the path of the other contestants. Just as the announcer was about to call off the race, Lulun came barreling down the road at full speed. Seiichi told her to slow down, but she said she couldn't control her speed. She jumped over the other contestants and landed in the midst of the grand wolves with so much force that her landing sent them flying in different directions. The hell wolf tried to attack her, but it seemed that the fruit had doubled her strength and with one kick, she knocked it out. The other contestants were scared of going against them and forfeited the race, but Lulun ran to the finish line and they were declared the winners. Artoria and Seiichi stood among the crowd, beaming with pride at their man. The only person who wasn't happy about their win was Lulun because she had wanted the fish and Seiichi tried to comfort her. She was hunting him when she started glowing, and that was the moment Seiichi and Artoria came inside. They stood with their mouths open as they looked at Lulun, who had transformed into a human. Seiichi got a little bit excited at the sight and had a nosebleed as soon as she hugged him. Confused Lulun asked her master what was going on, and as Seiichi tried to explain to her, Artoria also came up to him and asked what he was doing. But before he could explain the misunderstanding, she punched him in the face. When Seiichi told her that the naked woman was actually Lulun who had changed because he fed her the fruit of evolution, she didn't believe him and told him to come up with a better lie. Seiichi told her it was the truth, but Artoria told her to stop defending the lying, cheating bastard, so Seiichi had no choice but to turn into her gorilla form right in front of her. She couldn't believe her eyes and looked like she was going to pass out, but instead she told Lulun to follow her. In town, she found a clothing store and they bought clothes for her. As they stood in the store talking, two Valkyries came to take Seiichi away. They bound his hands with a spell and asked him to follow them. In the demon realm, all the captains of the different divisions of the demon lord's army were gathered in a conference room. As they spoke amongst themselves, Luchabut, the demon lord's daughter, walked in. After she thanked them for answering her summons, she explained that she had summoned them because she wished to discuss a possible alliance with the Windberg Kingdom. The captains were all shocked in cries. The demon lord Seiichi asked why she would want to make peace with the filthy humans who had been persecuting demons for years. He reminded her that it was the humans that had sealed her father away, but Lydia said that it was all the more reason for them to draw their people together. She said that the king of the Windberg Kingdom was already trying to make friends with demons. Leia then told them that she had gotten information that the human who had defeated the Black Dragon God was from the Windberg Kingdom. She said the Black Dragon God had told her that he had been defeated by a human named Seiichi. He also told her that they had fought fair and square and he had lost to Seiichi. Kreis told Lutia to remember the prophecy that said joining forces with the humans would bring great calamity on them, and she said if that happened, she would give up her head. He kept pushing the issue, and one of the captains told him to shut his mouth and follow his master's orders like the dog he was, or he'd deal with him. Some of the other captains agreed and threatened him too, and like a coward. He ran away, but not before he told them they would regret joining hands with the human. The captains swore to support Ludia with her plans, and she thanked them. Alone in the throne room, Kreis was worried that his plans would be ruined, but said no one would be able to stop him either way and laughed like a maniacal madman. The Valkyries took Seiichi to the Archshell Castle, and when he asked why they had brought him there, they told him that as the winner of the Royal Cup, he had earned the right to spend the day with them. They took him to the training ground where their captain Luis and other Valkyries were training. Seiichi watched them and was impressed by her skill, but was also surprised that even with his sixth sense, he couldn't follow her movements. Louise walked up to them and introduced herself to Seiichi before she placed a sword in his hand and asked him to have a mock battle with her. Meanwhile, Seiichi's schoolmates were teleported to the Barbados Magic Academy, and Kanazuki got into a confrontation who challenged her and her friends to a mock battle. When she refused, they tried to intimidate her, but she slapped one of them, causing them to back off while advising her to watch her back. Back at the training ground, Louise attacked Seiichi, but he easily dodged, and she was surprised he was able to dodge the attack. But Seiichi assured her that it hasn't been easy like she thought. She told him she would use her full strength with her next attack and unleashed a series of attacks on him, but he was able to dodge them all. As she was about to land her final attack, Seiichi acquired additional skills. He easily dodged the attack and kicked her sword out of her hands, making the Valkyries present shocked as they couldn't believe he had gone toe-to-toe with their captain and won. Seiichi himself couldn't believe what happened because his body had moved on its own. Louise asked if she could call him master and asked him to take care of her. Another Valkyrie asked Seiichi to come with her because she had something to tell him. In some other part of the castle, the king was getting ready for a bath but was unaware of the assassin that watched him through a hole in the ceiling. The Valkyrie that Seiichi had followed out of the training room told him that Louise was born without any magic or skills. But Seiichi thought she was just straight up lying because he just fought her. She said Louise was able to recreate any swordsmanship she saw, and Seiichi thought it was an impressive talent. She said the only person that could match her was the Black Paladin, and before she could say more, Louise walked in and apologized to Seiichi for calling him master without his permission, and thanked him for saving her. Seeing that she was confused, she explained that because of her talent, people were scared to be friends with her, and so she was all alone and had no one to call friends. Seiichi could relate with her because he too had once led a sad, miserable, and lonely life, so he agreed to become her master. She thanked him, and he said he wasn't sure he could teach her well, but she told him not to worry as she would just copy whatever he did. Just as Louise said they should go train, they heard a piercing scream and ran to investigate. They saw a maid who told them that someone had attacked the king, and Louise asked Seiichi to go home, but he said he wanted to help, but they refused. Instead of doing what he was told, the stubborn ass used the skill, World Vision, to locate the culprit and discovered that the assassin was just a child. Still tracking the assassin's movements, he checked her stats and learned her name was Oliga Calmeria, and she was only 8 years old. He also learned that she was enslaved. The assassin jumped down from the roof and Seiichi confronted her. She tried to kill him, but he easily caught the knives she threw and gained a reflex defense skill, which made his body react immediately. Before he could react, the reflexes kicked in, and he threw the knives at her, but she couldn't dodge them, and they pinned her to the wall with her robe. She got free and tried to attack him again, but he easily dodged. Seiichi wondered why such a small child would be an assassin and tried to question her, but she did not give him the chance to. He eventually knocked her out only for Louise and the Valkyries came in, and when they saw the child, they asked Seiichi who she was. So he told them she was the one who attacked the king, which was shocking. Louise told him to hand the girl over to Lorna and asked her to interrogate her. Seiichi didn't look convinced that Lorna could actually do the job because of how unserious she looked, but Louise assured him that she was the best, saying that she had learned all her interrogation skills from Eris. Upon hearing this, Seiichi was sure she'd learned everything, but how to actually interrogate a prisoner from Eris. Seiichi asked how the king was doing, and Louise told him that he would not wake up as the knife Oliga had used was a cursed one, and the curse embedded in it was eternal slumber. She said that whoever was cursed with eternal slumber would never wake up, and Seiichi wondered if he could do anything to help. He then asked them to take him to the king. In the king's room, Seiichi was surprised to see that the king was Ranz, the man he had met at the cafe. Louise introduced Seiichi to the head of the kingdom's magic division, who happened to be her brother Florio. He told them that he had used healing magic on the wound, but was unable to remove the curse, and the Valkyries became worried because they thought they would not be able to save the king. They pleaded with Seiichi to help them save the king, and since he had a magic creation skill, he tried to create a spell that would heal the king. While trying to visualize what he wanted in the spell, Seiichi's mind kept imaging the stupidest things, and when the dumb idiot tried again, all he could do was say "get better." He kept repeating the words and accidentally said it out loud, and it was at that moment that everyone realized they had put the king's life in the hands of the biggest fool they had ever seen. Luckily for him, his skill kicked him and created an invert magic called "get better." The dullard didn't even know what it meant and was surprised it actually worked. The king woke up and was surprised to see Seiichi there, but Florio told him that Seiichi had saved him by undoing the curse that had been placed on him. The king thanked him and promised to give him a reward, but he refused, which made Louise ask him to drop the good boy act and stop pretending to be modest and ask for something he wanted. In the Kaiser Empire, Zekia went to see the king and asked where the heroes were. The king said he had sent his new slaves to Barbator Magic Academy so he could intimidate the other nations. At the academy, Kanazaki and her friends were discussing how the heroes were the most hated people in the academy, when the three scumbags who had challenged them before interrupted them. She told them to leave, but they refused and threatened to cause a scene. She didn't tell them what they had been talking about. After she told them, they laughed and reminded her that Helio, the old geezer with the warts, had told them to show their power as heroes, and since they had been able to master magic easily, They had simply exercised their rights as the best by putting the others in their place. However, Kanazaki claimed that they had gone too far, but they told her to get off her high horse and stop acting righteous, and not wanting to cause more problems, she and her friends walked away. Louise asked Lorna how the interrogation was coming along while they took a bath, but Lorna admitted that she had not been able to get anything out of Oliga since she was being tight-lipped. They then talked about how cool and manly Seiichi had been when he told the king to allow him learn magic and swordsmanship with the Valkyries as his reward. Meanwhile, outside the castle in a bathhouse where Saria, Artoria, and Lulun were taking a bath. Artoria asked if they were not worried about Seiichi, who was yet to return, and said that there was a possibility the womanizing piece of shit would come back with another woman on his arm. Saria said she wasn't worried because he could overcome anything, while Artoria admitted she was jealous and even imagined Seiichi making out with the Valkyries before Duskull somehow made his way there and took Seiichi in his arms. Meanwhile, in the castle bathroom, King Rans told Seiichi that his dream was to build public bathhouses throughout the world, because apparently everyone was equal when they were naked and in a bath. In the Kaiser Empire, Zekia asked the king why he had sent the heroes to the academy, saying that something bad could happen to them, but the king said he didn't care if anything happened to sacrificial lambs who were meant to serve him. Zekia could not believe that he would be so cruel and asked what he would do if the heroes became too powerful and turned against them. The king's advisor said that it would never happen because he had personally placed enslavement bracelets on them, and if they tried to take them off, they would die. Before Zekia could say more, an arrow flew in through a window, and he quickly stopped it before it could reach the king. He told the advisor to look after the king while he went after the assailant. Using the opportunity that they were alone, Hilio, the king's advisor, told him that he had heard that the demons and the king of the Windberg were forming an alliance. He told the king that it was an insult to him since he was preparing to go to war with the demons. The king just laughed and told him that he had already sent the Twilight Assassin to take care of the Windberg king. Floria woke Seiichi up, and when he saw Saria, Artoria, and Lulun, he asked what they were doing there, so Florio told him that they had asked to see him. Artoria then told him that Saria was very worried about him, and that she was jealous because she thought he might be developing plot with the Valkyries, but Saria called her out on her bullshit. Just then, Louise came in and referred to Seiichi as master, while Saria and Lulun complimented her. Jealous Artoria was ready to beat him to a pulp. Fearing for his safety, he immediately explained that she was the captain of the Valkyries. Saria then introduced herself as Seiichi's wife, and Florio congratulated him for landing such a babe, but before Seiichi could respond, Artoria introduced herself as his girlfriend, and Lulun introduced herself as his loyal servant. A surprised Florio called him a wild man, while Louise claimed she was proud to have him as her master. Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Lorna had tied Oliga up and was preparing to begin her interrogation. Lorna began her interrogation, and as Seiichi watched from another room, he wondered if she thought she was in a cop drama. Lorna tried to get Oliga to talk by teasing her with the smell of food while she ate, and because Seiichi couldn't bear to watch this poor excuse of a bad cop movie, he barged into the room. Louise followed suit and untied Oliga. Seiichi then told her to eat as much as she wanted. When she finished the meal, Louise told Seiichi that the collar she had on was an enslavement collar that forced the wearer to obey the orders of the person who placed it in them. Seiichi realized the collar was the reason Oliga had attacked the king and Lorna. Seiichi then asked why they couldn't just take the collar off, but Oliga said it wasn't possible, and to prove her point, she pulled on it and was immediately electrocuted. Seiichi was enraged and wondered who would do such a cruel thing. The king of the Kaiser Empire had just gotten the news that Oliga had failed and was enraged, but Hilio told him not to worry because she still had her collar on. The king asked if he was going to make her kill herself, and he said yes, prompting the king to approve immediately. Meanwhile, somewhere in the forest, Zekia was training and wondered if he was doing the right thing by wielding his sword for the Empire. He remembered his encounter with the assailant who had tried to kill the king. The man had said he did it to take revenge for the demon girl that had been killed because the king had given the order. Zekia had told him that it wasn't enough for him to threaten the Empire by attacking the king, but the man told him that he was nothing but a mindless puppet that always did what he'd been told. They got into a fight, and the man used his skill to make arrows rain on Zekia, but he managed to deflect them all. The man said he had expected nothing more from the blade of the king and told him that he would meet him again when he was no longer a puppet. Back in the Windbird Kingdom, Seiichi had been told that no one but the person who had placed the collar on Alaga could take it off, and there was no magic spell that could handle the situation. He then decided to create a spell that would allow him to remove it, but he couldn't visualize it properly. Looking at her pained expression, he promised to free her, and that was when he got an image of freedom in his mind, and his version of freedom turned out to be Abraham Lincoln.
There! That should be the perfect visual!
He unintentionally projected him, and he appeared in the room chanting the word free. That was how the new liberation spell called President Link was created, and the collar on Olga broke. When Seiichi told her she was now free, she burst into tears, and the clueless Seiichi had no idea what went wrong, but Serio went to her and hugged her while Artoria couldn't believe that someone had done something so cruel to a little girl. Despite what was happening, Lulun was busy eating the leftovers and disturbing the very emotional moment, because the only thing that mattered was food. Alaga told them that in the Kaiser Empire the beast folk were being persecuted. She explained that they took all the adults to a concentration camp and trained the children to become assassins. She had lived her life serving as a killer for the Kaiser Empire, and admitted she had killed a lot of people since the collar was placed on her. She claimed that she was only valuable as a killer and nothing more, but Seiichi took her hand and told her she could start over again. He told her that the Kaiser Empire was the evil one for treating the beast folk differently. He asked her to see him as an elder brother, and Seria asked if Alaga could stay with them. But Alaga said she couldn't because the Kaiser Empire would come after them since she was now a traitor. He promised to protect her, saying that even though he looked like a weakling, he was actually strong. He asked Luis if it was okay to take Alaga, and she said she had already planned on asking him to take care of her. Helios spoke to Kryze through an orb and asked him what the Demon Lord's army was doing. Kryze told him that although they had to make changes in their plans because of Lucia's wish to join hands with the Windbird Kingdom, the plan was coming along well. On hearing this, he was glad their plans were working and promised to do his part as well. Seiichi was learning to control his water magic under Florio's guidance, and when he complained how stressful it was, Florio told him that he was doing well compared to the first time when he almost drowned them. While he watched Seria and Artoria do their own thing, Luis came to them. She asked him to protect the king while she was away, and when he asked where she was going to, she told him that they had received a report from the Black Paladin that monsters were becoming more active along the border. So she and the Valkyries were going to help him handle the situation. He agreed to her request, and she thanked him. When the Valkyries were ready to leave, Seiichi and the others came to see them off while promising to handle things while they were gone. In the castle, while Seiichi was lamenting how overpowered and monstrous he was becoming, he heard Gussel's voice. He also noticed Eris, and when Seiichi asked what they were doing there, he'd explained that they had escorted someone to see the king. As the poor Walmart budget Frodo walked up to them, Florio recognized him as the holy mage Barnabas, and when Seiichi asked who he was, Florio was appalled by his level of ignorance and said that he was the only mage to have mastered all kinds of magic. He then went ahead to geek out like a true otaku over his idol and lost his cool when Barnabas said he knew who he was. While they spoke, Seiichi wondered why such a great person had come to see the king. In the throne room, King Rans welcomed Gussel and Eris, who hadn't left their weird behaviors at the guild. When he saw Barnabas, he was surprised and asked why he hadn't informed him of his plan to visit. Seiichi asked what their relationship was, and Florio told him that Barnabas had been the king's teacher. Rans asked why Barnabas had come, so he revealed that it was because of the Magic Academy. He said that since the Isekai'd heroes joined the academy, they had brought nothing but trouble. Before Seiichi could confirm if they were his mates, a knight came to inform them that a horde of monsters had appeared in the forest and were invading the capital city. He reported that there were about 5,000 of them, all boss level. Rans was worried, and Barnabas said he had nothing to worry about since they had the mighty Valkyries, but Rans told him that they had gone to defend the border. At the border, Louise was surprised by the number of monsters gathered, and the Black Paladin told her that he had destroyed a large number of them before they came, but they were still coming. Louise suggested they used an all-out attack so they wouldn't be able to recover from it. She then led her Valkyries into battle. As the battle raged, she was informed that monsters had invaded the capital city. From the demon realm, the weirdo Helio giggled as he watched the chaos unfold in the human realm. As they watched the monsters approach, Artoria admitted that in all her years as an adventurer, she'd never seen that many monsters at the same time. However, Seria was excited for the opportunity to fight again, and Lulun said she was scared because if they could not defend the city, she wouldn't get to eat all the food she loved again. Seiichi couldn't believe the dumb donkey was thinking about food at such a critical time, but she laughed like a crazy person and said she'd fight for the sake of good food. Alika pulled on Seiichi's robe and offered to help them because she wanted to live happily with them in the city, but Seiichi asked her to make sure she didn't overexert herself, and she made him promise to pet her head if she did well. Aside from them, all the other weirdos from the guild were present, and they each reminded Seiichi why he had considered them crazy in the first place. With everyone pumped up, they charged at the monsters, and before Seiichi could join them, Barnabas told him to stay behind and watch. Gussel somehow used the power of his muscles to bring down the monsters, while Eris managed to tie some of them up and used her whip on them. The man-baby dropped milk bottles that exploded, and while the Flasher used the blinding power of his junk on the monsters, Claude was the only normal person amongst them. Even the Mohawks used some weird technique they claimed was passed down in their clan. At that point, Seiichi just had to agree that they looked cool. He watched on as the cafe owner easily defeated a King Beast and King Rands, revealed he didn't expect anything less from a former assassin. Saria was able to take down the monsters by using her gorilla arm, and Arturia used a freezing spell before killing her opponent. Lulun used her powerful kicks, which she named Lulunillion Shot, and little Oliga slashed through the monsters easily. Finally, Barnabas used a spell called Chaos Rain, which rained fire down on the monsters. Despite that, the monsters kept coming, so he used Chaos Tornado to sweep them away, but managed to keep it from touching his allies. Just as Seiichi was getting optimistic about the battle, another report came informing them of another horde of monsters, this time all big boss grade, which was way bigger than the last. As they watched the monsters approach, Barnabas claimed the horde was filled with S-rank monsters, and at that point, the guild members and the knights were struggling against them and were being pushed back. Seiichi wondered if he could create a wide Rongaze spell to defeat the monsters, but the problem was that it could also take out his friends and allies along with the monsters. After pondering the idea, he finally came to a conclusion and told Barnabas that he knew the ultimate spell to end everything. He envisioned a spell that attacked from above and acted like the judgment of God. In his mind, he saw Lady Justice and called the spell Judgment before he activated it, but when nothing happened, he fell to his knees in shame. Just then, Lady Justice lifted her sword and delivered her judgment, causing lightning to strike the monsters one by one, completely annihilating them. When the light struck Gussel and Eris, the weirdos embraced the pain, even asking for more. Seiichi checked the stats of the spell and discovered that it struck those it deemed harmful, and apparently those too were a plague to humanity. With the monsters wiped out, they celebrated their victory. Hilio, who had been watching everything from the demon realm, and as he was complaining, Lady Justice struck him too with judgment, leaving him looking like a rare cooked steak. Since Seiichi had defeated all the monsters, he received new skills and items from their remains, but complained because he didn't need more cheat skills. Rands and Barnabas praised him and asked him to keep using his powers to defend their kingdom before leaving to check on the damage that had been done. The girls came to meet him as soon as Rands left, and Arturia asked what magic he just used, saying his status was a lie, and that he'd been pretending to be weak all this time. Oliga called Seiichi's attention and reminded him of his promise to pet her head if she did well, and as he did that, so Barnabas tried to look cute and asked him to pet his head too. Disgusted, Seiichi immediately refused. Finally getting serious, Barnabas asked Seiichi if he would come to his academy and become a teacher. Seiichi asked why he wanted him, and he said that he was impressed by the spell he used to wipe out the monsters. He then said that he knew it was a spell of his own creation, and he wanted to learn from him. Even though Seiichi kept trying to refuse, the stubborn old man was determined and insisted that he come to the academy. Seiichi told him that he had promised Louise to protect the king and the kingdom while she was away, and that he also couldn't bear to be away from his women. Barnabas then explained Saria could enroll as a student, while Arturia could come as a teacher, and even Lulun could either become a student or a martial arts instructor. Still, Seiichi refused, but the girls claimed they had no problem with it as long as they were all together, so he agreed to go with Barnabas once Louise returned. Since they still had time before Louise returned, Seiichi decided to take each girl out on a date. The first was Lulun. Their date was at a restaurant, and the greedy donkey pigged out on all the food she could eat. He took Arturia out next, and then went shopping before heading to the theater. His last date was with Saria, but she asked if she could bring Oliga with them because she felt bad leaving her alone. The three of them went out, and while they watched Oliga play with other children. Seiichi thanked Seiichi for loving a good-for-nothing loser like him, and after professing his love to her, he tried to kiss her, but the children noticed Seiichi was crying and called Seiichi a bad man. He tried to explain himself, but they lost interest in what he was saying and asked him to play with them. As they played, they noticed something floating in the sky, and on it were different pictures, and one of them was Mei. At the town square, charity painting competition was being held. Seiichi and the girls went to watch with a lot of enthusiasm. The MCs soon introduced the contestants and their paintings, and the first was clay, and when he unveiled his painting, the crowd wasn't impressed. Seiichi called it a pretty sun, and Lulu said it looked like an apple, while Seiichi wondered why she only thought of food. They were surprised when Clay said the painting was the flames of a matchstick. The final contestant was Mei, and she was very nervous when she unveiled her painting. Seiichi was shocked to see that she had painted him like a gallant knight sitting atop a horse, but in his case, it was a donkey. She explained that it was a painting of the man who gave her courage to enter the competition, while revealing the title of the painting was Hero, because he was indeed her hero. Seiichi congratulated Mei on winning the competition, and she told her that Clay's grandfather had offered her the opportunity to go study in Emiria, the city of art. She asked if he would allow her to paint him as her first painting after graduating from the art school, and he said yes. She then bid him farewell and left with Clay. Meanwhile, the Valkyries finally returned to the city, and Seiichi met them at the gate, where he welcomed them. Louise told him that she heard he would be leaving with Barnabas and wanted to go with him, but he told her that he understood she needed to protect her kingdom and asked her to visit them sometimes. Back in the demon realm, Kryze lay on the floor looking depressed when he got a call from the Demon Lord's apostles, and as they spoke, the Demon Lord demanded to know why they were delaying in bringing him back. Cowering like the coward he was, Kryze informed him that the apostles were scattered across the world trying to gather the despair needed to sustain him. The Demon Lord claimed that it wasn't enough and demanded they offer him more despair, death, and misfortune, so that they could bring about his return. A female apostle suggested they target the Barbator Magic Academy, since it was filled with children of royalty and ability from around the world. She said that taking the lives of the children was sure to bring great despair and chaos, and Hilio agreed to it. At the academy, Kanazuki remembered her conversation with another female student who had asked about Seiichi. She said he had once saved her, and she wanted to repay him. On the day Seiichi and the girls left the city for the academy, their friends from the guild, along with King Rance and the Valkyrie, all came to bid them farewell. They thanked him for all he's done for them and told him they would be waiting for his return. On their way to the academy, Barnabas asked Seiichi if he missed the city, and he said he loved the place and its people and would surely return someday. Barnabas told him they were almost at the academy and that he was counting on Seiichi, and before he could respond, something dropped on the roof of the carriage. Seiichi looked out and saw a guy dressed like a superhero. When he asked who he was, he introduced himself as the hero of justice, guardian of certain victories, and asked him to remember it. However, Seiichi simply branded him as yet another weirdo. Do you think Seiichi would reunite with his classmates on good terms, or is it going to be worse than what happened in Arifureta? Let us know if you want part 2 by commenting Gorilla Waifu for the win in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you guys in the next video.